Hey, this is Jonathan Gilliam. Make sure you go check out all my books. Start with the best-selling Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and the 2 workbooks that are fillable that go right along with it, the Threat Assessment and Defense Assessment workbooks. Also, for your children, The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. Now, that's a book of pictures you give to your children, and you let them go through it, and in the pictures are lessons about security and awareness, and you, the parent, go over to teamlittlebigs.com and download the free lesson plans that go with each picture. All of this is a package that makes your life, your family more aware, safer, and able to look at yourself from the attacker's point of view. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. It's 2 accompanying workbooks, and The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children, and the lesson plans that exist on teamlittlebigs.com. And now, let's start the show.
As many of you saw the result of the photograph of me at Lafayette Square last week, that sparked a national debate about the role of the military in civil society. I should not have been there. My presence in that moment and in that environment created a perception of the military involved in domestic politics. As a commissioned uniformed officer, it was a mistake that I have learned from.
This is Jonathan Gilliam back in on the Experts Podcast. The truth has arrived, and it's about time. If you've been watching the news lately, crazy. Like that soundbite right there. Ridiculous. From Mark Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, feels the need to apologize for his role in the photo op when the president walked over to the church across the street from the White House. I mean, this has just gotten completely out of control here, folks. I'm going to play the soundbite again with several others as perfect examples of where this is going. Because, you know, one of the things that people keep telling me is that what they're getting out of this show more than anything is stuff that nobody else is telling them. And so that is really my focus, not just to cover the day's news, but sometimes that's all you can do is cover what's going on. But usually there's something behind the what's going on. There's usually something there that you can actually point to and say, yeah, that's a little odd. And there's a much more of a backstory to it than what they're telling you. And a lot of times the backstory is that the headline itself is fake. And so let's start with that soundbite again. Let's see if I can pull it up here. Let me just got to adjust the sound first. Let's see here. And the reason why I focused in on this so much is that this is what's happening over and over and over again, where people are coming on and they're doing sound bites, whether or not they're getting permission. I don't know. You know, I have no idea whether or not this guy, Mark Milley, has the permission to come out and say the things that he's saying. I particularly would fire him instantly if I was the president. This is just a common theme with these generals, whether they're actually in duty or active duty, or if they're retired. But even so, if they're collecting a paycheck from the government, they are still bound by many of the laws, which include speaking out against the president. They don't even care, I don't even know if they know that, but they don't care. So here, let's listen to that soundbite again. Let's give me 1 second here.
As many of you saw the result of the photograph of me at Lafayette Square last week.
Okay, first of all, the photo wasn't just of you. Okay, Joint Chiefs of Staff Milley. The the photo was the president and his staff. And the photo, although I've said publicly that I thought it was bad optics, I understand why he did it. And it's his choice as the president to go there and make a statement in the church where the church was burned right outside of the White House. I mean, does anybody realize that happened? That a church that every president in modern history has visited and prayed at was burned during a quote unquote protest. It was a riot. And so they pull the troops out there. They push the people back because they're throwing water bottles at them. It's not this whole nonsense about peaceful protest. These people, many of them are rioters, and they work this way where some of them are rioters, some of them are not, and then there's the useful idiots that march along. But you tell them to back up, and they will instantly turn on you. And that is not a peaceful protest. That is a potentially violent protest. So they push these people back. The president takes his staff over there. I don't know the exact reason why he did it, but I will tell you that it was a show of force and saying that, this is God's house and he's the president and he holds up the Bible and shows that he is still in control of that area. I thought it was a very important message to the American people. A lot of people were worried that the White House was going to get overran. And that would be bad because people would have to be shot then. But this general is making it all about himself. He's just like the rest of these people. He's making it all about himself. And so he feels the need to come out and apologize.
That sparked a national debate about the role of the military in civil society.
No, you did not spark that debate. A lot of people didn't even recognize your dumbass there, General.
I should not have been there.
You shouldn't be in your position. You should not be in your position. Somebody who's coming out and what he's about to say shows that he is an incompetent political buffoon.
Presence in that moment and in that environment created a perception of the military involved in domestic politics.
Well, guess what? Your military is involved. The National Guard is involved because mayors and governors can't get it right in many places, and it's created an imminent threat to the surrounding public that has overwhelmed law enforcement. Now, unless conservatives and militias are going to pick up guns and go out there and enforce the law, the next step is for the National Guard to come out and help as force multipliers to help police that area. And this idiot thinks it's all about him. It's not about him. He thinks because he's up on that level where these elitists live, he thinks it was all because he was there for that picture. He's part of the executive branch. He's under the control of the president. The president is the commander-in-chief of the military. And he had all his people there. And I think it was a good sign. But this guy wants to make it about himself, and he is making it political.
As a commissioned uniformed officer, it was a mistake that I've learned from.
Okay, so here's the other part about this. He's saying that for the perception of him to be involved in the political process in uniform is against the UCMJ. Well, he's actually right about that. But what he was doing there was at the behest of the president, his commander-in-chief. So he has to do what his commander-in-chief tells him as long as it's a lawful order. And that was a lawful order. Follow me over. We're going to take some pictures, show that the people can't come into Washington, D.C. and burn the place down. I thought it was, I don't know if that was their message. That's what I took from it. And I think if the president wants that and he has his general there, then the general should go over there with him. I didn't see it as a political statement on behalf of the general. But while he's here apologizing, he's saying nothing about the troops that are out there taking a knee and walking in protest with these people, many of who have no clue about the reality of what they're protesting about. They think it's about George Floyd's death. And for many of them, that's their motivation. But what's happening in Seattle has shown that that's not the case with a lot of these people, with the organizers of these protests. It's not about Black lives. It's about socialism. And this general is probably one of them. Because while he sits here making it all about himself, he's done nothing to make sure that the troops are not getting involved with this. The same thing with the FBI. I can't say anything about local law enforcement. They got to do their own, but the FBI comes under the executive branch as well, and they should not be taking part. It's a violation of the Hatch Act. And for the military, it's a Hatch Act, and it's the UCMJ that they're violating. The president wasn't in a protest, and it wasn't a political, well, it's always political when the president's there. But his advisors work with him, and if he steps in front of a camera, they can be there with him. It's not the same. So this knucklehead, and I'm looking at him, and he looks like a knucklehead. This guy comes on and talks about how, he shouldn't have been there as political. Yet he does nothing to stop what's going on out there where the National Guard is being deployed. They shouldn't even be close to the people unless they are interacting with them as far as their mission goes. They're not there unless their mission is to be mediators between the people and the violence and stuff. If that was their job, then that's their job. But that is not their job. That is not what the National Guard is there for. They are there to keep peace. And they are there to keep peace when things reach a certain level, like a riot or violence or shooting. They're not there to stand around, make nice, and try to take a knee with everybody as a kumbaya moment. I don't even care if they agree with what the protest is going on about. That's not their job when they're on orders. If they're not on orders, they can take their uniform off and they can do whatever they want. As long as they're using their position and going out and getting on a mic or something and saying, hey, I'm in the military, I disagree with the president. You can't do that either. Hey, this guy doesn't even know his own job. That's how incompetent he is. He looks about as much like a real general as some guy in Hollywood that's playing a general. Ridiculous. Now, when we look in Seattle's newly formed Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, I mean, really, Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, that's what they call it. It's in Seattle. Seattle is getting what they asked for. But it's only like a 6-block area. But it is a sign of what this story that I read in My Northwest, I guess it's an online publication out of Washington State. When I started reading this, like everybody else, I'm kind of just completely befuddled with the fact that they can have these people in this area. But when I started reading it, I thought, man, this is a perfect example for the listeners of this podcast so that they understand the reality of what's going on here. Now, I've said this numerous times on the show the past week. It's a slippery slope for anybody who wants to speak out about what's going on. But I can't be deterred by that, because the reality is even the people that are angry and that think they're out there doing the right thing, they're not hitting it from the right perspective. They're not out there because they want to make the country greater and they want to unite the people. They're out there because they got a chip on their shoulder because of something that's happened to them or something that's happened to somebody else, or because what they perceive is the reality. They don't take into account the society itself within the inner city where this stuff starts. They don't take into account what police officers deal with on a daily basis. They don't take into account the fact that liberal Democrats are the ones who have messed policing up by messing up and not funding proper training. See, here's what's interesting about the Democrats. They'll tell you don't militarize the police, but they will give tons of money to SWAT because they think that these people have to be specialized. You can train up your law enforcement and not even have to have SWAT if they're trained to an elite level where they can think their way through these problems. But they don't do that. Or they promote bosses because they're of their political leaning, not because they're effective bosses in law enforcement. And you end up having people that are not qualified at the top. And also, they ensure that people are being hired to fill a quota based on race or gender, when they should be filling the quota based on who's effective and who shows up. If 40 people show up for a job in law enforcement and 15 of them are highly qualified. And let's say they're going for 12 slots. But out of those 15, none of them fit the need of somebody with dark skin or a female. They will compromise the effectiveness of these people that are coming in, getting somebody who's effective, who's made for that job, and they will take somebody who's less qualified based on their race or on their gender. And in certain cases, some cases, their sexuality. So when we look at what's actually happening, it's way more complicated than a cop that leaned on a guy's back and murdered him. And yes, that cop murdered him. Murdered George Floyd. This article points all that out, because while people are marching and thinking that the cops are just bad and the cops are trying to get out on them, they've never been with the cops. They don't see what they deal with on a daily basis. They don't understand. People, I really don't think the majority of people realize how dangerous it is in the inner city. They don't. They think cops, as is apparent with Noah Wiley, whatever his name is, the guy that took over the Daily Show for Jon Stewart. This guy thinks he's smart and hilarious like all the other leftists, but he's neither. He's not funny or smart. But listen to what he has to say about cops.
I can't even believe that cops lasted this long. I mean, this was always such a weird show. Who comes home from a long day at work and is like...
Okay, first of all, he's talking about the police, or the television show Cops. It got canceled. So did Live PD. Unbelievable that this would happen, that this cancer of this cancel culture is like a cancer going through society right now. Anybody that doesn't, they're even talking about getting rid of the police dog in, I forgot what that cartoon is, but it's a kid's cartoon. There's a police dog in there. They're going to get rid of that. Elmer Fudd can't carry a shotgun now in that cartoon. So this guy's talking about cops and how it's gotten canceled. And when he talks about, I can't believe that people would come home and say to themselves, now listen who he's making himself sound like. And this is a total racist thing that he's doing here. He's making himself sound like a white guy. And so he's going to belittle people with white skin and put them into a category, exactly what he and others are protesting about for people with dark skin. He's going to do the exact same thing against people with white skin, and he is belittling them.
I want to unwind, let me watch some broke shirtless guys get their lives destroyed. It's the only way I can get some sleep. And
see what I'm talking about, folks? Double standards everywhere. You can, I said this on television today. I did a hit for Pittsburgh television station. You cannot go into this with hate or without knowledge of the reality of what's going on. If you go into this problem to try to solve it with love in your heart of unity. I know it's hard with hearing that from a SEAL, but it's true. Love has to be in your heart. Love of country, love of mankind, love of your fellow citizens, and trying to figure out, how do we fix this thing? How do we fix this thing so that everybody, can strive to be the best that they can be? Not that you're given the same thing, but that you're able to have the opportunity to strive like anyone else. And that's really what it all comes down to. But these people don't come to the table with that kind of attitude. They come to the table with their own racist views. And what's interesting is 100% of the people that I know would love nothing more than to live in a country, in a nation where law enforcement didn't have to be aggressive. Nobody wants to deal with that, white or black. And there are white people that have been killed because police stayed on their back too long and smothered them. Look it up. I just saw a meme about it. But law enforcement's tactics and their aggression has been increased as the violence and aggression of criminals in the country increases as well. And even people that are non-criminals, they get pulled over, they get in an argument with a cop, and they think, F this guy, or this girl. I'll just say whatever I want. And that's what police deal with on a daily basis. Now, I've said over and over again that there needs to be reform in law enforcement so that we train more the officers to a more elite status. We give them the weaponry they needed. We give them the body armor they needed. We get rid of or really downgrade SWAT so that these individuals get the money, get the training, and they're fully qualified to face any type of circumstance. Because when you take an individual to that level, their ability to think their way through the problem is much greater. So these people show up to the table with the attitude, you must conform to what I feel. You must watch what I think is best for you. You must do what I think is the solution. And that is their attitude. That's why this is not going to go anywhere. But listen to the rest of this.
Though this might seem like a frivolous thing, like removing cops from TV, I'll be honest, I think this is a move in the right direction.
Of course you do.
Because people take for granted how our perceptions of the police are shaped by the shows that we watch on TV. So
I don't think anyone's perception of police is shaped by what they watch on TV when it's a sitcom. They may sit and watch Cops or Live PD and see the reality of what's going on, but their perception is not going to be shaped by that. People that have hate in their hearts for cops have probably dealt with something, or they've known somebody who's had, who dealt in a violent way. Most of the people, though, that deal with police officers in a violent way, almost 100% of them were doing something criminal and got themselves into that position and tried to fight the cops, or they escalated it and the police escalated as well. And all they can see is that cop hit me. They don't think about the fact that they were actually aggressing the officer. But listen to the shows that he brings up.
You hear about police brutality, a lot of people are like, well, that can't be right. I grew up watching shows like Miami Vice and Starsky and Hutch and Hawaii Five-0 and all the...
He picked the three white bread shows, police shows that have ever been. The most unrealistic shows ever. And shows that nobody watches anymore. Nobody's watched any of those shows for 20, 30 years. I don't know what his audience is, but it's not geriatrics.
Cops, they never did anything wrong. In fact, if you think about it, even when we used to watch cop shows about a policeman violating somebody's rights or, beating them up to get a confession, what would we think as kids? We wouldn't judge that cop. Because of how the story was told, we'd be like, this cop is trying to do his job, but the Constitution is holding him back. So, no more cops. And that isn't the only problematic content that's being removed from American TV.
Yeah, he's right about that. Gone with the Wind is being removed, and then it's going to be put back, HBO says, with a disclaimer talking about its racist overtones, when it's telling the story of a slave owner during the Civil War. So now they can't even reference true facts that there were slaves in this country. As bad as it was, should never be hidden. It is a part of who we are. It's what strengthened us. It's what strengthened this country, is the fact that we were able to overcome that because of the strength of our Constitution. Somebody wrote me on Twitter the other day when I put something out, and they said, yeah, you're talking about the same Constitution where a black man was less than a white man. When it was written, yes, that is the case. But the way the Constitution was written was to ensure you could not keep that. I don't even know if the founders realized that. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But the way the Constitution was so beautifully written, it would only be a matter of time before it would be challenged that all human beings must be shown as created equal. And it eventually got to that for the first time in the history of mankind because of that Constitution. This guy's an idiot. I don't even watch that show. I just happened to catch it as I was turning the channel. And it's especially bad because there's no laugh track. So his crappy jokes are just crappy. There's not even a laugh track now. He's an idiot. Okay, so let me go through this article here about Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. the 6-block command post, I guess, that Antifa has there in Seattle. And I'm going to skip through the majority of the stuff that they're saying here, because what I want to point out is the reality of what these protests are all about. They come down here and they talk about their demands. It says the group has recently published a lengthy 30-point list of demands for Seattle City Council and the mayor's office. Some go far beyond what council members like Teresa, I don't even know how to say her last name, this other girl, have proposed in recent days, including a call to abolish Seattle Police Department and and the attached criminal justice apparatus. They want to get rid of all of it, right? These are communists. That's why listen, socialists are people that most of the people that claim to be socialists have no idea what they're talking about. Socialism is the doorway for communism. You have to go through the socialist process in order to get to the utopia of communism. Most of these people don't realize that. I've talked about this in extreme levels on this show, but I would advise you to go research this. Right now is more important than ever. But what these people want is to skip over. And I was saying this, I wrote an op-ed that I could not get published over 2 years ago. And basically the op-ed was talking about the difference between AOC and Nancy Pelosi. They believe in the same thing, but it's the speed at which they want to get there. And these individuals want to get there even faster. They want to skip completely over the socialist process, creating the division, having this great conflict so that a synthesis will happen, and out of that will come communism. And there's a whole process in there and how they do that. Well, they just want to skip straight to communism. And they want to get rid of the government, because that's what communism touts, is that it'll be a system without government. Where if you need, if you can work, you work, and if you need, you take. Right? There is no process where mankind is involved where that would work. Only Satan would try to deceive you into thinking that that is possible, because he believes that's possible under his authority. But they want to scrap the police department and the entire criminal justice apparatus in Seattle. Other demands on the list are more wide-ranging, including, now listen to this, okay? The reason this all started, when it did, most people believe, was because of George Floyd's murder and because of the perceived injustices on black people in the United States. Remember, I'm not comfortable saying black. I don't like calling people by the color of their skin. However, if you turn on anything Oprah Winfrey related these days, or Discovery Channel or any of these other places, CNN, you're going to see that if you don't call somebody black, I don't know if they're calling you a racist for not calling somebody black, but they call, people are on television now pointing out the fact that they're black over and over and over. And I thought we were trying to get away from that. So anyway, if these individuals were in line with that same thought process, George Floyd was murdered, this has gotten me completely outraged now, and we have to stop these injustices by the police departments, then this would be about the police department and about the relationship with the city, with the people, with the black community, and all communities, so that they could unify. And you see that that's not the case. So when we look at what they are wanting, what their demands are in this story about this particular place where the cops have left. They left their precinct and these people took over. Their demands have nothing to do with George Floyd. Abolish the police department and the attached criminal justice apparatus. Do you think that people who wanted to ensure a just and civil society for all people would want to get rid of police department and the justice system? That's not what people that want unity would do, because anybody that knows anything about the human psyche knows that there will always be people who take advantage of other people. There will always be racists. There will always be, and that's of all colors now, there and always has been. There will always be people who don't like you and people who love you in a crazy way. There will always be people that are power-hungry narcissists. And none of those people truly understand unity. And these people don't either. It's not about George Floyd. Look at what their other demands are. What would you think? What would you think? Making sure that the community and the precinct that patrols that community has a great relationship? No, that's not what they want. They want rent control restoration. They want restoration of city arts funding and free college across Washington state. That's what they want. Do you think that they would want to start developing a relationship with the churches and the religious institutions in their communities to try to push people towards family units and not fatherless families? No, that's not what they want. No. They want rent control. They want the city arts funding back. And they want free college, along with dissolving the police department and the criminal justice apparatus. That, folks, is a socialist desire, a communist desire. It has nothing to do with George Floyd. It's just this is the bandwagon that they have attached themselves to, because ultimately that's what they want. They want this division. And as Saul Alinsky talked about, these are the useful idiots. They will do the bidding. But listen, in the end, they are not going to have the freedom and the authority that they want through that system. That system is a freedom killer. Because just as you've seen, even though Live PD was one of the highest rated shows on television, and was the highest in its time slot, if they don't think that you should watch it, you're not watching it. And who am I talking about they? Am I talking about somebody of color? Am I talking about somebody that is a protester? I'm talking about the socialist. I'm talking about the useful idiots. I'm talking about white and black. Anybody that doesn't realize they are not working towards unity and think they can force you into unity, that's who I'm talking about. And they think them telling you what you need to watch and how you need to live and how you need to be policed is the way it should be. And that ultimately is a socialist mindset that these people will never be able to sustain, that the higher ups will eventually, those with the power and the money, will take over and crush all these people. They'll crush you. They'll crush me. They don't care. How do I know this? Do I have a crystal ball? No. It's called history. And wherever communism takes part in the world, this is exactly what happens. Socialism, this is exactly what happens. Fascism, exactly what happens. Dictatorship, same thing. And for these people to go around doing what they're doing is a direct threat to our Constitution and our civil society. And I don't see any way around it, and I don't see anyone doing anything about it. This cancel culture has merged with a socialist movement, and that socialist movement has masked itself behind racial justice. And it's a lie. Socialists and the movement, they have merged themselves in between the cancel culture and racial justice. And if you step back and look at it, this is what you'll see. You don't have to be white or black or college educated or a cop or military. Look at history. Look at the tactics that the communists and socialists use to enslave people. These people are tearing down monuments of slave owners that were put up around the country. They were probably power people back then. Some of them are generals. Many of those generals, whether they were part of the South or the North or Confederacy, whatever you want to say, are directly responsible for the way our military is laid out now. And it's a slippery slope now. We just used to take it for granted. As far as the military bases go, I've always thought when it comes to military bases, they should be moved and placed around the perimeter or the border of the United States. You'd end up having training areas in every type of atmosphere that you could want: desert, mountainous, the plains, and then let them be the border patrol. And name them base 1, base 2, base 3, base 4. I don't have any problem with that, to tell you the truth. But I do have a problem with this movement. And now, as I was saying, if you want to see the reality of what's going on, just look at history. It gives you everything you need to know about what's happening and what's expected to happen. Now, I've talked about Oprah and this ridiculous show that they had on, and I played some sound bites from it the other day. Yesterday or the day before. And it is the people that they have on there on that show they're leftists, they're separatists, they're racists. And I've been on a radio show with Tamika Mallory. She's one of the most racist people I've ever met in my life. You can be a racist and be black. Okay. You can be a racist and be Korean. You can be a racist and be white. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The ignorance of racism is something that you decide. And regardless of why you came to that decision, it is something that you alone are capable of stopping. But now we have whole communities that are brainwashed into thinking that it must be done my way, and it doesn't matter what the other person's opinion is. Nowadays, what gets confused with racism is really two different groups of people, or multiple. There are people who hate cops that aren't black. A lot of these different groups that are taking part in these protests and causing problems, those people are not black, but they hate the cops. But what people think of as systemic racism today, and I've had several shows on this, really has less to do with the color of somebody's skin and is based more on the interactions that they have or the perceptions that people project and the aggression of law enforcement, the disrespect on both sides. These are things that can be worked on, but that's not what people want. See, that's the difference between old racism, where people truly hated others just because of the color of skin, or they thought they were less of a person. Or in Japan, during World War II, the Japanese thought that they were of an evolved human species. Some of the things that Americans went through when they were caught in their prisoner war camps was terrible, because they didn't feel like they could feel anything. The Japanese thought that we were lesser humans. Yeah, it's not just blacks. Talk to the Jews. Talk to the Cubans who were oppressed in Cuba. I think we got some of the most incredible stories. But look, I think this is a good place to stop for tonight. Not a very long podcast tonight, but I was watching these videos of, I've got a wooden chair if you keep hearing that. That's what that is in the background. I was watching these videos of, it happened live on television. They were pulling down, I think it was in Virginia. They were pulling down these Confederate statues. And these morons, are climbing all over this stuff, spraying paint on there so it's slippery. They tear the head off one, and then they strap it to a chain and then strap that to a van, I believe. And it's like watching a bunch of chaotic ants. They're screaming and hollering. I'm sure a lot of them are freaking doped up or drunk and having a party out of it and thinking that they're really doing something great for the country. Again, I don't want this monument, so we're going to tear it down instead of having a conversation about it. So they tear it down, and it falls on top of a dude, and he coded twice. That means he died twice. I think he's in critical condition now. And watching that fury, he interviewed some of the people right before it happened, and the fury that was in them is exactly what I'm talking about. You cannot show up. I don't care what your experience is. If you've had a bad girlfriend or a bad boyfriend, you should still go out and try to find somebody good as a mate. They're out there. And it's the same thing in this circumstance. You may have had bad experiences your whole life with cops, or you may have actually met people who are racist. But not all people are racist. And if you show up with the rage and you try to tell people and force them to unify or force them to make you equal, that will not work. It has to be a table that you sit down at. And if you sit down at it peaceful because you want to work it out, you will be surprised at what happens. That's why Christ and everything that he did himself always worked out, because he showed up to the table and he showed up with love at his heart. And when you look at Satan, everything he did was always a lie. It was based on a lie. And it ended up in chaos. That is the way that history has taught us. Remember, history teaches you almost everything you need to know. But folks, you have to realize, if you want to make a change in the country, if you want to unify, you cannot show up with hate in your heart. You have to show up with love of country, love of God, love of your fellow man. And you have to show up wanting to fix what is broken, not tell people you will be this way, you will watch this, you will do that. Because you know what happens? You want to know what the reality of this is? When you show up saying, we demand this, you will be this way, you will do this way, we want you to act, dress, talk, speak, and think like this, you are a socialist. And that is exactly what will be done to you as the socialists get in charge. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. This is The Experts. The truth has arrived. Peace, and we're out of here.